Book 5. At day's first light, have in readiness, against this inclination to leave your bed, the thought that I am rising for the work of man. Must I grumble at setting out to do what I was born for, and for the sake of which I have been brought into the world? Is this the purpose of my creation, to lie here under the blankets and keep myself warm? Ah, but it is a great deal more pleasant. Was it for pleasure then that you were born, and not for work, not for effort? Look at the plants, the sparrows, ants, spiders, bees, all busy at their own tasks, each doing his part towards a coherent world order, and you will refuse man's share of the work instead of being prompt to carry out nature's bidding? Yes, but one must have some repose as well. Granted, but repose has its limits, set by nature, in the same way as food and drink have, and you overstep these limits, you go beyond the point of sufficiency, while on the other hand, when action is in question, you stop short of what you could well achieve. You have no real love for yourself. If you had, you would love your nature and your nature's will. Craftsmen who love their trade will spend themselves to their utmost in labouring at it, even going unwashed and unfed. But you hold your nature in less regard than the engraver does his engraving, the dancer his dancing, the miser his heap of silver, or the vainglorious man his moment of glory. These men, when their heart is in it, are ready to sacrifice food and sleep to the advancement of their chosen pursuit. Is the service of the community of less worth in your eyes, and does it merit less devotion? Oh, the consolation of being able to thrust aside and cast into oblivion every tiresome, intrusive impression, and in a trice be utterly at peace. Reserve your right to any deed or utterance that accords with nature. Do not be put off by the criticisms or comments that may follow. If there is something good to be done or said, never renounce your right to it. Those who criticize you have their own reason to guide them, and their own impulse to prompt them. You must not let your eyes stray towards them, but keep a straight course and follow your own nature and the world nature, and the way of these two is one. I travel the roads of nature until the hour when I shall lie down and be at rest, yielding back my last breath into the air from which I have drawn it daily, and sinking down upon the earth from which my father derived the seed, my mother the blood, and my nurse the milk of my being, the earth which for so many years has furnished my daily meat and drink, and, though so grievously abused, still suffers me to tread its surface. You will never be remarkable for quick-wittedness. Be it so then, yet there are still a host of our qualities whereof you cannot say, I have no bent for them. Cultivate these then, for they are wholly within your power. Sincerity, for example, and dignity, industriousness, and sobriety. Avoid grumbling, be frugal, considerate, and frank. Be temperate in manner and in speech. Carry yourself with authority. See how many qualities there are which could be yours at this moment. You can allege no native incapacity or inaptitude for them, and yet you choose to linger still on a less lofty plane. Furthermore, is it any lack of natural endowments that necessitates those fits of querulousness, and parsimony, and fulsome flattery, or railing at your ill health, or cringing and bragging, and continually veering from one mood to another? Most assuredly not. You could have rid yourself of all these long ago, and remained chargeable with nothing worse than a certain slowness and dullness of comprehension, and even this you can correct with practice, so long as you do not make light of it, or take pleasure in your own obtuseness. There is a type of person who, if he renders you a service, has no hesitation in claiming the credit for it. Another, though not prepared to go so far as that, will nevertheless secretly regard you as in his debt, and be fully conscious of what he has done. But there is also the man who, one might almost say, has no consciousness at all of what he does, like the vine which produces a cluster of grapes and then, having yielded its rightful fruit, looks for no further thanks than a horse has run his race, a hound has tracked his quarry, or a bee that has hived her honey. Like them, the man who has done one good action does not cry it aloud, but passes straight on to a second, as the vine passes on the bearing of another summer's grapes. According to you, then, we should rank ourselves with things that act unconsciously? Exactly. Yet we should do so consciously, for as the saying goes, awareness that his actions are social is the mark of a social being. But also, surely, the wish that society itself should be equally aware of it? True, no doubt, yet you miss the meaning of the aphorism, and so put yourself in the same class as the persons I have just described, who likewise are misled by a specious kind of reasoning. Apprehend the true significance of the saying, and you need never fear that it will betray you into omitting any social duty. The Athenians pray, "Rain, rain, dear Zeus, upon the fields and plains of Athens." Prayers should either not be offered at all, or else be as simple and ingenious as this. Just as we say Aesculapius has prescribed horseback exercise, or cold baths, or going barefoot, so in the same way does the world nature prescribe disease, mutilation, loss, or some other disability. In the former case, prescribing meant ordering a specific treatment in the interests of the patient's health. Similarly, in the latter, certain specific occurrences are ordered in the interests of our destiny. We may, in fact, be said to meet with these misfortunes in the same sense as masons say that the squared stones in walls or pyramids meet with each other when they are being fitted closely together to make the unified whole. This mutual integration is a universal principle. As a myriad bodies combined into the single body, which is the world, so a myriad causes combine into a single cause, which is destiny. Even the most common people realize this when they say it was brought upon him. It was indeed brought upon him. That is, it was prescribed for him. Let us accept such things then as we accept the prescriptions of an Aesculapius, for they too have often a harsh flavour, yet we swallow them gladly in the hope of health. The execution and fulfilment of nature's decrees should be viewed in the same way as we view our bodily health, even if what befalls is unpalatable. Nevertheless, always receive it gladly, for it makes for the health of the universe, and even for the well-being and well-doing of Zeus himself. Had it not been for the benefit of the whole, he would have never brought it upon the individual. It is not nature's way to bring anything upon which is under her government, except what is specifically designed for its good. There are two reasons then why you should willingly accept that happens to you. First, because it happens to yourself, has been prescribed for yourself, and concerns yourself, being a strand in the tapestry of primordial causation, and secondly, because every individual dispensation is one of the causes of the propensity, success, and even survival of that which administers the universe. To break off any particle, no matter how small, from the continuous concatenation, whether of causes or of any other elements, is to injure the whole. And each time you give way to discontent, you are causing within your own limited ability just such a breakage and disruption. Do not be distressed, do not despond, or give up in despair, if now and again practice falls short of precept. Return to the attack after each failure, and be thankful if on the whole you can acquit yourself in the majority of cases as a man should. But have a genuine liking for the discipline you should return to. Do not recur to your philosophy in the spirit of a schoolboy to his master, but as the sore-eyed recur to their egg and sponge lotion, or as others to their poultice or the douche. In this way, your submission to reason will not become a matter for public display, but for private consolation. Bear in mind that, while philosophy wills only what your own nature wills, you yourself were willing something else that was at variance with nature. Yes, but what other thing could have been more agreeable? Is it not the inducement wherewith pleasure seeks to beguile you? Yet consider, would not nobility of soul be more agreeable? Would not candour, simplicity, kindness, piety? Nay, more, when you reflect on the precision and smoothness with which the process of ratiocination and cognition operate, can there be anything more agreeable than the exercise of intellect? As for truth, it is so veiled in obscurity that many reputable philosophers assert the impossibility of reaching any certain knowledge. Even the Stoics admit its attainment is beset with difficulties, and that all our intellectual conclusions are fallible, for where is the infallible man? All turn from this to more material things. How transitory, how worthless are these, open to acquisition by every profligate, loose women, and criminal. Or look at the characters of your own associates. Even the most agreeable of them are difficult to put up with, and for the matter of that, is it difficult enough to put up with one's own self? In all this murk and mire, then, in all this ceaseless flow of being and time, of changes imposed and changes endured, I can think of nothing that is worth prizing highly or pursuing seriously. No, what a man must do is to nerve himself to wait quietly for his natural disillusion, and meanwhile not to chafe at its delay, but to find his sole consolation in two thoughts. First, that nothing can ever happen to us that is not in accordance with nature, and second, that power to abstain from acting against the divine spirit within me lies in my own hands, since there is no man alive who can force such disobedience upon me. To what use am I now putting the powers of my soul? And examine yourself on this point at every step, and ask, how stands it with that part of me men call the master part? Where soul inhabits me at this moment? A child's, a lad's, a woman's, a tyrant's, a dumb ox's, or a wild beast's? The popular conception of goods can be tested in this way. If the things a man identifies in his own mind with goods are such things as prudence, temperance, justice, and fortitude, then, given that preconception, he will have no ears for the old jest about so many goods, for it will lack any point. On the other hand, if he shares the vulgar notion of what constitutes goods, he will readily appreciate the joker's quip and have no difficulty in seeing its aptness. The majority do, in fact, entertain this idea of values, and they would never take offence at the witticism or refuse to hear it. Indeed, we must accept it as an apt and clever observation if we take it to refer to wealth of all things which conduce to luxury or prestige. So now for the test. Ask yourself whether we do right to set store by things and think of them as goods, if our mental picture of them is such as to give meaning to the jibe that the owner of so many goods has no room left to ease himself. I consist of a formal element and a material. Neither of these can ever pass away into nothing, any more than either of them came into being from nothing. Consequently, every part of me will one day be refashioned by a process of transition into some other portion of the universe, which in its turn will again be changed into yet another part, and so onward to infinity. It is the same process by which I myself was brought into existence, and my parents before me, and so backward once more into infinity. The phrase infinity may pass, even if the world be in fact administered in finite cycles. Reason and the act of reasoning are self-sufficient faculties, both inherently and in the method of their operation. It is from sources in themselves that they acquire their initial impetus, and they travel straight forward to their own self-appointed goals. Actions of this kind accordingly receive the name of straightforwardness in reference to the undeviating line they follow. Unless things pertain to a man as man, they cannot properly be said to belong to him. They cannot be required of him, for his nature neither promises them, nor is perfected by them. Therefore they cannot represent his chief end in life, nor even the good which is the means to that end. Moreover, had man's natural heritage included such things, it could not at the same time have included contempt and renunciation of them, nor would the ability to do without them have been any cause for commendation, nor, supposing them to be really good, would failure to claim a full share of them be compatible with goodness. As it is, however, the most a man deprives himself, or submits to be deprived, of such things and their like, the more he grows in goodness. Your mind will be like its habitual thoughts, for the soul becomes dyed with the colour of its thoughts. Soak it then in such trains of thought as, for example, where life is possible at all, a right life is possible. Life in a palace is possible. Therefore, even in a palace, a right life is possible. Or again, the purpose behind each thing's creation determines its development. The development points to its final state, and the final state gives the clue to its chief advantage and good. Therefore, the chief good of a rational being is fellowship with his neighbours, for it has been made clear long ago that fellowship is the purpose behind our creation. It is surely evident, is it not, that while the lower exists for the higher exists for one another, and while the animate is higher than inanimate, the rational is higher still. To pursue the unattainable is insanity, yet the thoughtless can never refrain from doing so. Nothing can happen to any man that nature has not fitted him to endure. Your neighbour's experiences are no different from your own, yet he, being either less aware of what has happened or more eager to show his mettle, stands steady and undaunted. For shame that ignorance and vanity should prove stronger than wisdom. Outward things can touch the soul not a whit. They know no way into it. They have no power to sway or move it. By itself, it sways and moves itself. It has its own self-approved standards of judgment, and to them it refers every experience. In one way, humanity touches me very nearly, inasmuch as I am bound to do good to my fellow creatures and bear with them. On the other hand, to the extent that individual men hamper my proper activities, humanity becomes a thing as different to me as the sun, the wind, or the creatures of the wild. True, others may hinder the carrying out of certain actions, but they cannot obstruct my will, nor the disposition of my mind, since these will always safeguard themselves under reservations and adapt themselves to circumstances. The mind can circumvent all obstacles to action and turn them to the furtherance of its main purpose, so that any impediment to its work becomes instead an auxiliary, and the barriers of its path become aids to progress. In the universe, reverence that which is highest, namely, that to which all else ministers, and which gives the law to all. In like manner too, reverence the highest in yourself. It is of one piece with the other, since in yourself also it is that to which all the rest minister, and by which your life is directed. What is not harmful to the city cannot harm the citizen. In every fancied case of harm, apply the rule: if the city is not harmed, I am not harmed either. But if the city should indeed be harmed, never rage at the culprit, rather find out at what point his vision failed him. Reflect often upon the rapidity with which all existing things, all things coming into existence, sweep past us and are carried away. The great river of being flows on without a pause, its actions forever changing, its causes shifting endlessly, hardly a single thing standing still, while ever a hand looms, infinity stretching behind and before, the abyss in which all things are lost to sight. In such conditions, surely a man were foolish to gasp and fume and fret, as though the time of his troubling could ever be of long continuance. Think of the totality of all being, and what a mite of it is yours. Think of all time, and the brief fleeting instant of it that is allocated to yourself. Think of destiny, and how puny a part of it you are. Is one doing me wrong? Let himself look to that. His humours and his actions are his own. As for me, I am only receiving what the world nature wills me to receive, and acting as my own nature wills me to act. Let no emotions of the flesh, be they of pain or pleasure, affect the supreme and sovereign portion of the soul. See that it never becomes involved with them. It must limit itself to its own domain, and keep the feelings confined to their proper sphere. If, through the sympathy which permeates any unified organism, they do spread to the mind, there need be no attempt to resist the physical sensation. Only the master reason must refrain from adding its own assumptions of their goodness or badness. Live with the gods. To live with the gods is to show them at all times a soul contented with their awards, and wholly fulfilling the will of that inward divinity, that particle of himself which Zeus has given to every man for ruler and guide, the mind and reason. Do unsavoury armpits and bad breath make you angry? What good will it do you? Given the mouth and armpits the man has got, that condition is bound to produce those others. After all, though the fellow is endowed with reason, and he is perfectly able to understand what is offensive if he gives any thought to it. Well and good, but you yourself are also endowed with reason, so apply your reasonableness to move him to a like reasonableness. Expound, admonish, if he pays attention, you will have worked a cure, and there will be no need for passion. Leave that to actors and streetwalkers. It is possible to live on earth as you mean to live hereafter. But if men will not let you, then quit the house of life, though not with any feeling of ill usage. The hut smokes, I move out. No need to make a great business of it. Nevertheless, so long as nothing of the kind obliges me to depart, here I remain, my own master, and none shall hinder me from doing what I choose. And what I choose is to live the life that nature enjoins for a reasonable member of a social community. The mind of the universe is social. All the events it has created the lower forms to serve the higher, and then link together the higher in the mutual dependence on each other. Observe how some are subjected, others are connected, each and all are given their just due, and the more eminent among them are combined in mutual accord. How have you behaved in the past to the gods, to your parents, your brothers, wife, children, teachers, tutors, friends, relatives, household? In all these relationships, up to the present time, can you fairly echo the poet's line, "Never a harsh word, never an injustice to a single person"? Call to mind all we have passed through and all we have been enabled to endure. Reflect that the story of your life is over and your service at an end. Bethink you of all the fair sights you have seen, the pleasures and the pains you have spurned, the many honours disdained, the many considerations shown to the inconsiderate. How comes it that souls of no proficiency nor learning are able to confound the adept and the sage, his alone who has knowledge of the beginning and the end, and of that all-pervading reason which orders the universe in its determinate cycles to the end of time? In a brief while now you will be ashes or bare bones, a name or perhaps not even a name, though even a name is no more than empty sound and reiteration. All that men set their hearts on in this life is vanity, corruption, and trash. Men are like scuffling puppies or quarrelsome children who are all smiles one moment and in tears the next. Faith and decency, justice and truth are fled up to Olympus from the wide-wide earth. What is it then that still keeps you here? The objects of sense are mutable and transient, the organs of sense dim and easily misled, the poor soul itself a mere vapour exhaled from the blood, and the world's praise in such conditions a vain thing. What then? Take heart and wait for the end, be it extinction or translation. And what, think you, is all that is needful until that hour come? Why, what else but to revere and bless the gods, to do good to men, to bear and forbear, and to remember that whatsoever lies outside the bounds of this poor flesh and breath is none of yours, nor in your power. Press on steadily, keep to the straight road in your thinking and doing, and your days will ever flow on smoothly. The soul of man, like the souls of all rational creatures, has two things in common with the soul of God. It can never be thwarted from without, and its good consists in righteousness of character and action, and in confining every wish thereto. If the thing be no sin of mine, nor caused by any sin of mine, and if society be no worse for it, why give it further thought? How can it harm society? Do not fall a too hasty prey to first impressions. Assist those in need, so far as you are able, and they deserve it. For if their fall involves nothing morally significant, you must not regard them as really injured, for that is not a good practice. Rather, in such cases, be like the old fellow who pretended at his departure to beg eagerly for the slave girl's top, though knowing well that it was worth nothing more than a top. When you are crying for votes on the platform, my friend, are you forgetting the ultimate worth of it all? I know, but these people set such store by it, and does that justify you in sharing their folly? No matter to what solitudes banished, I have always been a favourite of fortune, for fortune's favourite is the man who awards her good gifts to himself, the good gifts of a good disposition, good impulses, and good deeds.